Thank you. Well, Susan Miller and I are double teaming this. And I have to tell you first, when I told we were sitting around the dinner table one night, eating dinner, and my younger son, I got two sons, asked me, well, Dad, what are you going to talk about when you go down to Clemson? And I said, well, he's in third grade. I said, well, I'm going to talk about life cycle. He said, oh, well, we know about life cycle. We're talking about that in science class, and, the earth and the sky and everything. And then my older son said, he was in the 7th grade, he said, well, wait a minute, though. I'm in this health science class, and they're talking about something different there. And then my wife interrupted and said, now, we're eating dinner now. Let's just... So anyway, with that introduction, I'm here to talk to you about life cycle inventory for brick. And if you haven't heard, BIA has been directed by its membership to conduct a life cycle inventory for brick, and we started on that, and I want to talk a little bit about what that is, and we're going to talk about what the process is and where we are with that process at this point in time. Arrow? Other arrow. That's too far now. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what is a life cycle? Well, it's studying a product, and you study everything about it in terms of the raw material, everything that goes into the creation of that product, how that product is installed, and all the way to the end of its useful life, or disposal, or reuse, or recyclability. And at each one of those stages, you're going to consider the energy that's used, and also look at the environmental impacts from those different stages. So, said another way, it's all of the quantities of materials and energy and the environmental emissions that are associated with that product and the processes that are used to create it. So as you can see here, it's, and now I'm talking about a life cycle inventory in particular. We'll talk about the difference between an inventory and a life cycle assessment here in a moment. But what we've embarked upon at this point is a life cycle inventory for brick. So we're looking at all the materials that go into that process. We're looking at the energy that comes into the process. We're looking at the emissions that go out, and then the product and byproducts that come out of that process. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean for the brick industry? So materials, we're looking at clay, shale, all the additives, the conditioners, the colorants. It's pretty much everything that goes into making a brick. We look at 95 to 99% of what goes into that brick is what needs to be taken into account. And then for the energy side, we're looking at natural gas. We're looking at the diesel that it takes, the diesel fuel that it takes to powering the equipment that you have. We're looking at gasoline, electricity that's involved with that process. And then for emissions, we're looking at not only the air emissions, but if there's any water emissions that take place, any solid waste that comes about as a result of that process. So specific activities, we're going to look at everything in the process, from extracting of that material to the processing of it itself, the stockpiling, all the machinery that needs to, that follows through with that process. The forming of the material, everything having to do with the pug mill, the extruder, the belts, the cutting, the setting of the brick, as it goes through the entire process, the drying, the firing, and finally the dehacking, the packaging, and the storing of the brick on the yard. That's the point at which we stop with the life cycle inventory. Now this is a flow diagram that we developed that shows all the different areas that we're talking about for typical brick plant operation. and that encompasses everything from the mining operation all the way up through the storage of the brick. So everything you see that's inside of this dotted line that goes around the entire, let me see if I can use this. So everything that's in that dotted line is what we're talking about for the life cycle inventory. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a life cycle inventory and a life cycle assessment. Life cycle inventory sometimes is commonly referred to as a cradle to gate assessment. So you're looking at everything having to do with producing the product. It's the first step in an LCA, or a life cycle assessment. A life cycle assessment is commonly referred to as a cradle to grave look at a product, and it goes further than an LCI. An LCI is the first part of that, but an LCA takes that brick outside of your yard and takes distribution, and then as a product gets installed into a building, and then the end of life of that product. So in a graphic way to look at it, an LCI is here, and that's everything having to do with your operation and manufacturing brick, and having that brick then sit on your yard. And then the distribution and installation of that brick, it's hard to do this from the side, is that encompasses portions of the LCA. So what we're talking about now is doing the first part of this, which is the LCI. So now that I've talked a little bit about what this is, because I just wanted to make sure everybody had a good understanding of it, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it is we're looking at doing this and why our membership wanted us to do this. This came about as a result of a directive from the non-residential committee, who's concerned primarily with dealing with commercial construction or non-residential construction. And this was part of their directive in 2010. So that's when we started looking at this. We started looking at it earnestly in 2011 and ramped up things in 2012, and we'll look at where we are in the process a little bit later. Susan's going to get into that. So why are we doing this? Well, some of the published values for brick are very outdated, and they're not even based on anything having to do with the U.S. market. Their values are old Canadian values, and there's never really been a survey that's been undertaken of the U.S. brick market. The reason that this is becoming more a need, where we need to have this information more, is that this is becoming more and more something that the building code community is looking for. The green codes and standards, the next version of LEED will have a credit that's given to products that have an LCI, and if we had an LCI, then we would be able to get a credit for that. There's other LEED or other green codes or building regulations, something called the ASHRAE 189.1 has an LCA option, as does the International Green Construction Code. And so these are becoming more and more something that we're looking at. Susan's going to come up now, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the other implications for some of the work that she's done, and she's also going to talk about some of the survey work that we've done and show you a little bit about the survey.
She's back. EPA, the government, MSHA, OSHA, Capitol Hill. No, let me just say right up front, this is not about us helping them. This is about us helping us. A lot of people are out there, they spew out numbers or spew out lack of numbers. Sierra Club calls us an emissions spewing, energy consuming monster when they talk about us on the Hill. They can use whatever numbers they want. They can look at China, get numbers, and say, oh, that must be what we are. We need these numbers. We need them. They don't work they have no influence on the people we were talking about earlier, the people who are down in the ditches doing the actual regulations. They work with those soundbite-loving people higher up in the agencies, higher up on or on Capitol Hill who need these numbers. We can use these numbers. They will help us with the building code stuff. They will also just give us the data to fight back, marketing, whatever. They'll give us the ability to fight back. Because if we don't do it, if we don't get out in front like Jerry Carey was saying earlier, other people will insert their numbers and say, prove us wrong. So we need to do this. The survey, we've been working, it's an iterative process. You don't have to read all these, you'll see it when you get it. But I just want to talk about some of the ways that we're trying to make this easier. We've been working with people, we've been sending out drafts, and basically we're trying to make sure we're only asking what we absolutely have to ask. So we're not asking for every nth detail of every process yet. We're asking for the stuff we really need, your overall capacities, your overall information, your overall energy usage. It would be wonderful at some point if we can get to where we're asking the more detailed stuff. But right now, we're just asking for some big picture stuff so we can start scoping this out. On the environmental front, when we're working with a consultant and when we look at other people's surveys, they tend to ask you to estimate your emissions. We're not asking you to do that. Quite frankly, we have asked you enough to do that. We have every stack test data that we think on every hazardous air pollutant out there. We have most of them on all those criteria pollutants that we've been talking about. So rather than have you go out and try to estimate the emissions you need, we need for this assessment, and hitting all the questions of, is it actual emissions or potential emissions? Should I use the maximum emission factor or the average emission factor? We're not asking for that. We're asking for your data. We're going to go through and make sure we're making consistent estimates for everybody. We're going to do the calculations so that saves you time, saves, quite frankly, us time on quality assuring. We know everybody is being estimated on the same basis. So when you see the survey, if you get the beta test, if you were one of the lucky few to get the beta test, or when you get the ultimate survey, we are really working hard. And if you think of another way, a better way to give us the data, let us know. But for even on this is the air quality side. This is the one we know the most on. But even on the solid waste and the water, we're trying a different way. We're trying to get some overall, your reports you've already done, and trying to calculate a way to come up with your emission estimates. But again, it's an iterative process. We look forward to people's comments. Just let us know, and we're trying to work through this together. Progress so far in 2012, we've identified the data needed. We used a consultant to make sure we were getting everything right, so when we gathered this data, we wouldn't have a missing piece. We've developed the survey. We redeveloped the survey. We have now sent out a beta test on the survey. We're going to be refining it. We're going to be, right now we're asking for every material safety data sheet you have. Sorry. But we're looking for ways that we can reduce it. The life cycle inventory has to include 95% of all of your products and anything that has a significant environmental impact. Well, one, we don't know we can pretty easily say, we don't need to get any coatings, because clearly that's less than 5%. But there's that other environmental impacts. So we're trying to look at those, trying to look at the material safety data sheets we get, and trying to see if there's a better way than asking you for everything. Next year, we hope to send out the survey to all plants. We've got a few questions we have to answer first, but that's our goal. We'll be reviewing the data. We'll be reviewing our process for gathering the data. We have some stuff automated, built in to take your surveys and get it into the master database. We'll be testing that process on these 14 or so facilities. And then we'll be developing the LCI report. Pretty much said all this. One of the issues that we hit, one of our iterations was the question was raised, well, why would you want to gather data on 2011? I don't know if anybody's noticed, but that was not necessarily BRIC's best year. So are we not showing representative numbers? I mean, I've been taught since, in a very long time that, the last BRIC is your best BRIC. It's your most efficient BRIC. So are we putting our best foot forward by looking at 2011? I don't know. We don't know. Could it be that we're tending to use our better plants, so we're the more energy efficient in 2011 per pound BRIC produced? We don't know. So what we've done is we've tried to send out a survey to look at the energy usage to compare to 2011 and to 2007. Just a real rudimentary, can we put an answer to that instead of just we don't know the answer. So we're trying to get some numbers in so we can do some of these assessments and try to make this product as good as we can. It could be that we say, oh, 2011, we want to use the most current year. We could say maybe 2012 by then. We might want to say 2007 was a good year because it was a higher capacity year. But there are a lot of kilns that have shut down since 2007, so is that really where we want to go? Do we want to just punt this and wait for another time? Editorial comment here, I'm not all for that because there are people out there talking about us. If 2011 or 2012 isn't a great year, we still should get we could still get the process done, and then if a couple years down the road, we can look at our improvement if we want to, and gather that data much more quickly. Where we are, we've sent it to 14 plants. They're due now. There are 2 plants that two companies that get gold stars for having already submitted their data. We appreciate it. We appreciate with the people who are working to get the data to us. And we look forward to presenting more information to you in the future. And I'm looking, oh my gosh, 2 presentations, and I'm ahead of time. Let me just say real quickly the end of the story that Brian said. Brian talked about being up in Washington, and that meeting was one of the meetings, one of the reasons I love what I do. Not just because I love to argue, and I love to find my way through regulations, like Mary Ann said. My husband may have a point. Maybe he is a saint. But also because there are really great people that we work with. Brian didn't tell you this, but everybody kind of sat up straight when Merrifield made his nasty comment. And Brian said, no, sir, no, sir. You absolutely come after us if there's something that affects our worker safety. But if it's just a paperwork activity that stops us from doing something that protects worker safety, that's when we have an issue. Merrifield sat down and shut up at that point. It was great. It was just, it makes me proud. I love working with people like that. I'm still early. I'm just saying, my reputation is changing. Thank you, guys.